I'm Miranda LeBlanc. I work for Liberty Mutual Insurance, and I'm going to tell a little bit about crossing the CI/CD and DevOps chasm and what we've learned from our journey. So, who's familiar with the technology adoption lifecycle in Crossing the Chasm by Jeffrey A. Moore? Anyone here? Okay, so basically it's a bell curve, and in order to have your technology fully adopted, you need to somehow cross the chasm from your early adopters into your early majority. And until you can actually cross that chasm, you won't be successful. So I'm here because at Liberty, I feel like we're just about crossed the chasm on our CI/CD and DevOps journey. And I could say that because we're doing about 2,500 daily builds with over 1,000 production deployments per day. We have a globally available cloud platform in 6 regions now, and that's on both the IaaS and the PaaS. We have infrastructure as a service and Cloud Foundry for our PaaS platform. That Cloud Foundry PaaS platform is running over 600 production apps. And through all of those tools and that whole platform, we support about 10,000 users within Liberty Mutual. So before I get going, it's nice to meet you. I'm Miranda, as I said before. I've worked at Liberty Mutual for about 12 years now. I started on the business side. Went through all the training to be a licensed insurance agent, but knew I really wanted to get onto the IT side. So I came back, and I was a business systems analyst for a while. And while I was doing that, I started coding. And I found that that was my passion. And so for a number of years, I did a lot of software development. And then in the summer of 2016, I had the opportunity to do a Pivotal Labs engagement where I acted as the product manager. So I had to take off the engineering hat and learn a completely new discipline where my end users were engineers. So that was a little difficult, quite a bit of a struggle there. Came back from that, acted as a product manager for a while, and now I took a new position called engineering manager where I'm back doing development and coaching other developers. As you can see, we're doing a little bit of live pair programming up there. I recently participated in the beta program. I'm a Cloud Foundry certified developer. I'm a Spring Boot advocate within my company. In fact, I led the first application that was Spring Boot and deployed to production. And my team enables innovation by providing a delivery platform and cloud runtimes. So we're about 50 people, and we're distributed across balanced product teams. So today I want to talk a little bit about how we're approaching innovation at a very large insurance company. What was our story and how did we get here? And then what have we learned along the way? So generally, when you think of insurance and very large enterprises, innovation might not be the first word that comes to mind, as well as tech innovation. And if you're not familiar with Liberty Mutual Insurance, we're a pretty big company. We've got over 5,000 technology professionals, which is larger than most technology companies in general. And we have 800 offices worldwide, over 5 continents. So at Liberty, historically, making a change takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort. So I'm here to talk about what we're moving towards. So we want to be a cloud-native enterprise. And what I mean by that is we want to focus on providing continual and reliable delivery of valuable software. So we're really focused on what's going to bring value to our clients, whether they're internal employees or our actual customers. We're doing this by embracing DevOps. So we have a culture of trust, safety, and confidence within our application teams. We're also leveraging Agile and Lean methodologies. And we're favoring microservice architectures in organizations. And what I mean by this is a microservice is a small, independent service that's really good and focused on doing one thing really well. We want our teams to do that. We want our teams to be small, empowered, and focused on a small set of products and bring the most value to our customers through those products. In order to do that, for those teams to be fully enabled, we need to exploit cloud architectures and services. So they're not focused on the HVAC or the networking or the firewalls. They're focused on what's the business value that my app can provide. And in order to have that enablement as well, we need teams to operate in an open source fashion. So if they find that they need a change in another API that they're dependent on, they should be able to go ahead and do a pull request to that API that another team owns. So my team in particular, we're Liberty CloudForge. And we're an end-to-end software development platform that enables teams to have autonomy over their processes and solutions, solve problems that matter, and accelerate delivery. So I'm sure you've heard of the value line, where we want our application teams within Liberty to just focus on writing code that's providing customer value, and we'll take care of the rest. We'll set up your continuous delivery pipelines. We'll provide your issue management tools. We'll provide a PaaS platform for you to deploy your apps to, and API management to connect them together. But we're an insurance company, so that means we have a lot of financial data, we have a lot of customer data, we have medical data, so we need to make sure that we're following all the local, state, and federal regulations that are required for being in that industry. So we can't really fully operate like a startup. So what we try to do is build as much of that safety into our pipelines and into our platforms. So we want to build in safety, security, compliance, and ultimately confidence so developers can commit their code and know that if everything passes in the pipeline, they can likely deploy it to production without problems. So I've talked a little bit about where we're going and our goals, but I want to tell a story about how we got to where we are today. So our origins. Back in 2010, we had this vision of building this library of open source shareable components, kind of like a SourceForge or a GitHub within Liberty Mutual. And we wanted all developers across the company to use it. In order for developers to really jump in and want to use this, we had this idea of self-service provisioning of those tools so those teams can immediately start contributing to the library. The reality, we ran into a big cultural issue. So our developers, we really were focused on working within our individual departments and business units, and it was tough to try to get that collaboration going across the different business units. So there really wasn't much of an interest in open source collaboration. So at that point, we just weren't ready to even start looking at the chasm, let alone crossing the chasm. So what did we do? We learned from the lean startup and we decided to pivot. So we decided to focus on a problem within our own team. So at the time, we were supporting mission-critical web services. Those services provided tens of millions of transactions per day, and they had to be highly available across multiple data centers with 99.99% uptime. And basically, if those services were down, we couldn't quote and bind policies, so we couldn't make money. So that it was critical that these services were up. At the same time, we were a team of less than 10 developers, or just about, and we had a Scrum Master. We had very little budget. Because of that little limited budget, we didn't have some of the resources that were available to other teams, like a quality assurance team or performance testing, or really, we needed to have a little bit of scrappiness. So what our new goal was, what can we do and what tools can we bring in that's going to allow our team to do our job and provide these highly performant and stable services? So our new goal was to come up with a best-of-breed set of tools. So we went out and researched all sorts of different tools, and we wanted to come up with the best set of tools that we could integrate together so that it was a seamless experience, and that ultimately would provide our own team with rapid delivery and being able to make rapid changes to those services, but then also enable other teams across the organization. A little bit of a history about our progression. So in 2010, we had started experimenting with some tools, but in 2010, that was the first time we stood up a continuous integration platform, so that that time we could have multiple developers on the team making code changes, and using our automated testing, we could actually create our artifacts. And that was a huge step for our team, being able to do that integration. Over the next few years, we started adding in more features like static code analysis and code reviews. So we had, at that point, we had this time where we could really quickly build our software, but then it would still take a lot of time to actually deploy it because we were dependent on another team. So we made a proposal. We wanted to try doing DevOps, and we wanted to try writing our own automated deployment pipelines. So in 2013, we got those off the ground, and we could do our own automated deployments, but they were still to dedicated virtualized servers. So in order to get a new service up and running, it was still taking months because we had to wait for the infrastructure to be there. So in 2014, we decided we needed a better way to be able to, once we had an application, get it up and running pretty quickly. So we introduced our first Cloud Foundry foundation and brought paths to the organization. And when I say our first foundation, I think there were actually 6 of them at the time because we were across many data centers. In that same year, we also deployed our first Spring Boot application. And we saw that that was starting to build a lot of momentum. People were starting to move towards these microservice architectures. People saw a lot of value with Spring Boot and Cloud Foundry and how quickly we could get up and running. And we had way more requests than we could even handle for teams who wanted to come and use our pipeline. And at that point, it was a manual process. So over the next few years, we focused on building in those self-service capabilities so that developers now, I believe the record is, someone went from having code working on their local machine to having it deployed out in production in less than 5 minutes. So we've seen some success. So this chart shows the top curve is our total number of builds per month. The bottom curve is our total number of deploys per month. And right around that 2015 timeframe where we were seeing the microservices, the introduction of Cloud Foundry, Spring Boot was taking off, you can see that our total number of pipelines was dramatically increasing. But if we want to dive deeper and take a look at where are these pipelines deploying to, we can look at our cloud ratios. So the bottom, that kind of tealish, grayish color, those are our cloud deploys going to Cloud Foundry. The next section are the percentage of deploys going to Cloud Foundry running in the public cloud out on AWS. The next block up are our direct deploys to AWS. And then that last chunk, about less than 20% of our total deploys, is everything else. So we've seen our ecosystem totally change over 2 years from going to about 25% of our deploys going to Cloud Foundry to about 80% of our deploys. So it's been a huge shift. And it is a beautiful world. So the green section of this chart shows our total application instances and which build packs they're using in Cloud Foundry. And the green section, which is a huge chunk, that's Java. And the majority of those apps are Spring Boot applications. So the combination of those technologies and microservices has totally shifted the way that we're working. In order to continue building this momentum, we're focused on MVP. And what I mean by that is taking that minimally viable product approach to every single feature and every single story that we're working on. And we don't just want to build the minimum functionality. That would be a proof of concept. We want to build the minimal feature that will ultimately delight our customers. And how are we doing that? We're following the build, measure, learn feedback loop. from the lean startup. So those are the two main principles that our team follows. But we still have our own challenges. So as you saw, our platform usage is growing dramatically. But from 2010, with about 10 developers or 10 people total, to 2017, we only have 50 people total. That's not exponential. So how can we keep up with our adoption and make sure that we're still providing that stable and highly available platform? We also have this fear that our products are becoming too feature-rich. And have we been going back and removing the features that we've proven aren't adding value and are essentially causing noise? So are we going back and actually measuring what we did and revisiting and making sure it's still providing value? We also have kind of a cultural thing going on right now. So growing from 10 people to 50 people, the reason we had so much success in the beginning is it was a very small team. Everyone knew what everyone else was doing. Everyone understood every product inside and out. And now, we're growing, so how can we try to keep that feel as we're becoming more and more mature? So our set of challenges are completely different from the enterprise as a whole. So as John mentioned this morning, we're on a journey to transform this 100-year-old insurance company to try to follow a lot of these practices. But we're a large organization with many legacy systems, so how can we go ahead and make some of those changes, and where do we start? And all of these teams are at different stages within the organization at the transformation level. So trying to figure out, where each team is at, what are the resources they need, and how can we help them along this journey? So at this point, our team has seen a lot of success. As we were growing, we saw a lot of teams saying, hey, I want to see what you're using. I want to learn to develop the way that your team's developing. Let me hop on board. So we've also spent a lot of time reaching out and trying to help teams learn these new tools, learn these new practices, and really try to get these tools mainstream. So the first thing we learned is that CI/CD requires real software engineering skill. And what I mean by that is, we've had developers who are very talented, but they're using a whole new set of tools. So they may never have used a tool like Maven before or Gradle. So trying to learn that, it takes a little time to get used to this new way of working. We also learned that a lot of teams weren't as familiar with automated testing frameworks, so trying to learn how to use things like Mockito takes a little bit of ramp-up time. And we also know that we need to think about, how are we doing our whole process, because it's not just about automating, because it's really easy to automate those bad practices. So trying to take a holistic view at kind of what we're doing and how we're doing it. We also learned about defining our key metrics up front and using them. So I have an example from a team just a month ago that I was working on, and we were very focused on our code coverage percentage. So even though we had our code was 100% covered by automated tests, and all of our tests passed, and we passed our static code analysis, because we were so focused on that code coverage, we released a bug into production because we weren't focused on the value of the tests themselves. So make sure when you're thinking about what metrics you want to use, try to find metrics that are focused on your goals, but if they're not providing value and they're not actionable, it might not be worth measuring them. And be careful not to focus too hard on any one metric. We also learned that cultures and behaviors matter. So one of the hardest things that we've found to change is trying to get the whole team on board and every other team that you're working with to try to learn about this new different way of thinking. We still have teams, we'll still catch ourselves saying, oh, well, what date are we going to try to hit for that? Or are we under budget? And one thing that we're trying to work on through this is trying to use our roadmaps more as conversations and not commitments, because we know our priorities are going to change. So the roadmap should really be a conversation on what we're focused right now, and not a full commitment of what we're going to do for the next 18 months. A lot of people will ask me, well, what was the first step that your team took when you were starting to do this transformation? Well, my transformation happened overnight. So I made a lateral transition. I was working on a team that was following all waterfall practices. We were updating vendor products and supporting vendor products. We were delivering those straight to dedicated servers using shell scripts. And so I had to basically learn all about Agile, all about CI/CD, all about a cloud-native architecture, and jump back into my, basically learn Spring again, because it had been from 2009 till 2014, was a pretty big gap. A lot of things had changed in Spring. So what worked best for me was I had extremely patient mentors, the people you see up here, and they made the transition seamless for me. So ultimately, empathy and teaching with those examples and pairing up and really trying to figure out where someone's at and where a team is at was the best thing that I've seen as far as having success in this transformation. So empathy is essential to cross the chasm. And if you want to hear more about the technical side on how we've been breaking down these monoliths, there's a talk on Thursday for how to deconstruct monoliths with domain-driven design. Thank you.